The day Dominic Blackwood told me, "You need to understand your place in this company," was the day I finally understood everything. Not about titles, not about salary, but about how they saw me. After 21 years of dedication, after hundreds of sleepless nights keeping the system from collapsing, I was still just a number, easily replaceable. I sat in that cold conference room, staring at the paper in front of me. 2.8%. A number so small it felt like a reminder that everything I had done, everything I had sacrificed, wasn't worth what I once believed. Dominic didn't even look at me when he said it. He just straightened his stack of documents, as if the neatness of the paperwork mattered more than the person sitting across from him. And in that moment, I realized a painful truth. In some places, the more quietly you give, the more they assume you deserve less. But what they didn't know was that the decision I made right after that would cost the entire company. If you've ever felt underestimated like this, comment 1 to hear the full story. Because by the end, you'll walk away with something truly meaningful. My name is June Thornton. I was 50 that year, and I had spent 21 years of my life at a company I once believed was my second home. I wasn't the kind of person who showed up to big meetings with polished presentations. I didn't have an MBA from a prestigious school, and I wasn't great at throwing around words like strategy or restructuring. My job was simpler and much harder, keeping Summit Dynamics' cybersecurity system from falling apart. For over 2 decades, I was there when things were at their worst. Midnight attacks, vulnerabilities that could have cost the company millions. Moments where a single mistake could have shut everything down. And every time, I was the one who stayed until the very end, the one who didn't leave until everything was stable again. No one applauded those nights. There were no praise emails, just silence, and the expectation that I'd do it all over again the next time. Like a lot of people, I used to believe that if you did your job well enough, long enough, one day your value would be seen, that loyalty would be rewarded. But I was wrong. And that morning, when I walked into the meeting thinking it was just a routine salary review, I had no idea I was about to hear a truth that would change my life completely. I looked down at the fine print on the page. Merit increase 2.8%. That was it. After 21 years. I didn't say anything right away. I just placed my finger on the number as if to make sure I wasn't seeing it wrong. Dominic nodded, his voice flat. "This is the standard rate for senior technical staff." Standard. I let out a laugh, but no sound came out, because for the first time I understood. The problem wasn't the number, it was how they defined my value. If that number feels a little too familiar, drop a in the comments below. I leaned back in my chair, my eyes still fixed on that 2.8%. But in my mind, another name came through clearly. Lucas Reed. He'd been at the company for less than a year. Title, Director of Security Strategy. It sounded impressive. But I knew the truth. He had never personally handled a real attack on our system. He wasn't the one staying until 3 a.m. when the servers were overloaded. He wasn't the one watching every line of logs, looking for the smallest sign of something wrong. I looked at Dominic and asked directly, "You can't share other people's salaries, right?" He paused, just for a second. But it was enough. So I continued, "Then let me ask it another way. Is Lucas making nearly twice what I do?" Dominic didn't deny it. He just started talking about the usual things. An MBA from a top school, strategic vision, the ability to work with leadership. I let those words pass right through me, because I understood what they really meant. Here, your value wasn't measured by how many times you kept the system alive. It was measured by how important you looked in a meeting. And for the first time, I wasn't surprised anymore. Just done. I didn't react right away. No raised voice, no argument. Because after all those years working in the most high-pressure situations, I understood one thing. The most dangerous moments are rarely loud. They're quiet, and you only recognize them when everything becomes too clear to deny. I looked at Dominic, then back at the paper in front of me. The numbers, the phrases like internal benchmarks and market alignment, they all sounded reasonable. But in reality, they were just a polished way of saying, the company has decided your value, and they expect you to be compliant enough to accept it. In my mind, the years replayed like a fast-forwarded film. The attacks on the system, the nights I was the only one still online, The split-second decisions that could either save or destroy everything. In places like that, value is simple. Can you do the job or not? But here, things had changed. They no longer measured ability by what you had actually done. They measured it by how you presented it, by your credentials, by how you spoke in a meeting. And if you didn't play by those rules, then no matter how many times you kept the system alive, you were still just the one behind the scenes. I took a slow, steady breath. Not to calm myself, but to make sure I was thinking clearly. Because at that moment, it wasn't about the numbers on the page anymore. It was about my real life. Emily and Noah's college tuition. The monthly payments I still sent after my divorce from David. Health insurance getting more expensive every year. My retirement savings recently shaken by market volatility. 50 years old. This was supposed to be the stage where I felt the most financially secure. The point where all those years of effort finally started to pay off. But instead, I was sitting here, being valued like I was just another cost to be optimized. I wasn't angry, at least not the explosive kind. What I felt was colder, clearer, like finally seeing the full picture you'd been avoiding for years. I realized the problem wasn't Dominic, it wasn't Lucas either. It was me, staying too long in a place that no longer recognized my true value. And when you realize that, you only have two choices: sit there and accept everything as it is, or stand up and change everything. I didn't say anything else, no arguments, no attempt to prove anything. Instead, I opened my bag and took out a neatly folded sheet of paper. Dominic glanced down, probably thinking it was a complaint. But when I placed it on the table, right on top of the salary review, he froze. It was my resignation letter. Effective immediately. I could see the shift on his face, from indifference to surprise. He quickly said I didn't need to make a rushed decision, that we could revisit things, that everything was adjustable. But I just shook my head. I've been thinking about this. Not for one night, I said, my voice calmer than I expected, but for 21 years. The room went silent. No more HR language, no more numbers. Just one truth we both understood. This time, I wasn't the one staying behind to fix everything. I stood up, picked up my bag, and walked out of the meeting room without looking back. The door closed softly behind me, but I knew that sound would echo for a long time. If you've ever been in June's position, quietly giving your all without being seen, leave a 2 in the comments. I walked out of the Summit Dynamics building without anyone stopping me. No dramatic scene, no one running after me. Just a few glances, quickly pulled back to computer screens as if they had seen something they didn't want to be involved in. I understood. In places like that, people learn not to look too long at the ones who leave, because they're afraid that one day it might be them. I got into my car, set my bag on the passenger seat, and for the first time in years, I didn't rush to open my laptop, didn't check my email, didn't pull up the system dashboard. My phone stayed silent. For 21 years, there had never been a morning when I wasn't on call in my head. There was always a part of my mind ready for the next incident. But today, that part was gone. I started the engine, and in that exact moment, somewhere a few floors above me, the first warning signals began to appear in the system. Not a dramatic collapse, no blaring alarms, just small deviations, numbers drifting slightly out of safe thresholds, false positives increasing, response time slowing just a bit, signs that, to an outsider, might not seem like much. But to me, that's how a system begins to die. Before I joined Summit Dynamics, I had spent 6 years in the Navy, not in an office, but out on ships, where communication systems weren't just part of the job, they were a matter of survival. Out there, no one asked where you graduated from. No one cared how persuasive you sounded. When the radar dropped in the middle of a storm, or encrypted communications failed in dangerous waters, there was only one question: can you fix it? That environment shaped the way I see work. Systems don't exist to make reports look good. They exist to function, reliably, accurately, and without failure when people depend on them. When I joined Summit in the early 2000s, the company was just a mid-sized contractor with a system that was chaotic. Outdated networks, patchwork processes, missing documentation, and a long list of problems being covered up instead of fixed. The man who hired me back then, Harold Bennett, the former CTO, pointed at a whiteboard full of tangled diagrams and asked, "Can you keep this from falling apart?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I asked, "If I find a way to fix it at the root, will I have the authority to do it?" He nodded. And from that moment on, I started rebuilding everything. In my first few months at Summit, I barely changed anything. I observed, listened, took notes. I joined every incident call, read every postmortem report, and traced every data flow through the system like someone following footprints in the dark. And it didn't take long to realize something. The company didn't lack talented people. It lacked a system that actually worked. Everything was fixed, only after it broke. There was no proactive monitoring, no early warning signals. And worst of all, critical documentation either didn't exist or was dangerously inaccurate. I started documenting every failure that had ever happened. Not theoretical ones, real incidents. What broke, why it broke, what warning signs appeared beforehand, and whether the fix addressed the root cause or just pushed the problem down the road. By my third month, I had identified 15 critical vulnerabilities in the system. I didn't just point them out, I calculated the cost of fixing them versus the damage if they failed. Harold asked me one question: "How long will it take to fix all of it?" 12 months, I said, and the authority to say no when someone wants to take shortcuts. He agreed. I started by rebuilding the monitoring system because you can't fix what you can't see. Then came security, redundancy, automation, and logging. Step by step, I turned a fragile system into something that could survive a crisis. For many years after that, I barely changed the way I worked. I kept fixing issues, improving the system, and staying whenever something broke. The company grew, contracts increased, revenue went from tens of millions to well over $100 million. Leadership was happy. The board was satisfied. Directors received bonuses. And me, I got a small raise and a coffee mug with a joke on it. Most valuable player. I didn't complain. Not because I didn't feel the unfairness, but because I believed in something that, looking back now, I know was my biggest mistake. I believed that if I did good work long enough, my value would eventually be seen. I believed that consistency, resilience, and always being the one who stayed until the end would be recognized someday. That the person who kept the ship from sinking would eventually be invited up to the deck. But that's not how it played out. My silence didn't make them value me more. It just made them used to the fact that I would always be there. Always fixing things. Always solving problems. Always asking for nothing. And over time, that stopped being seen as value. It became expected. Things started to change about 3 years ago, when Summit decided to professionalize its leadership. That's what the new CEO, Stephen Blake, called it in an all-hands meeting. He loved phrases like digital transformation, strategic optimization, and operational restructuring. But he didn't like terms like technical debt, system vulnerabilities, or this will break if we don't fix it now. Within a few months, the hiring approach shifted completely. The company began prioritizing people who knew how to talk over people who knew how to do. Meetings became smoother, slides looked better, the language sounded more polished, but behind all of that, the system was still the same. The old problems were still there, just renamed with nicer-sounding labels. We had directors who had never written a line of code, vice presidents talking about operational efficiency, who couldn't explain how a firewall worked, and highly paid consultants brought in just to rename problems we had been flagging for years. That's also when Lucas Reed showed up. A perfect resume, confident presence, and almost no real hand experience with the system he was now shaping the strategy for. I watched the shift happen, piece by piece. But I didn't say anything. If you've ever seen a place change like this, where the people who understand the work get overshadowed by those who know how to talk, you probably understand exactly how I felt. And if you do, you can leave a 2 in the comments. I didn't go looking for that truth. That day, I was just trying to find a technical document Ethan said he had uploaded to the internal folder. I clicked on the wrong file, a directory with misconfigured access permissions, and then I saw it. Lucas Reed's offer letter. I paused for a few seconds, then I opened it. Base salary, $164,000. Signing bonus, $25,000. Annual bonus, 20%. Stock options, 15,000 shares. I read each line slowly, Not because I didn't understand, but because I understood it too well. Then I pulled up my own compensation, $200. No signing bonus. Target bonus, 5%, and in 21 years I had only received the full amount twice. Stock grants that had barely changed since day one. I sat there for a few minutes. It wasn't the money that shocked me. It was the gap. Lucas had been here less than a year. He had never handled a real attack, never kept the system alive through a crisis night. But this difference wasn't a mistake. It was a statement that what I did, no matter how critical, wasn't valued as much as how it was presented. And this time, I couldn't pretend I hadn't seen it. That night, when I returned to my quiet apartment after the divorce, I did something I had avoided for years. I reopened my resume. Not the bare minimum version, just to have one. A real one, detailing every system I had built, every incident I had handled, every time I had kept the company from collapsing. At first, I thought the list would be short, but once I started writing, I realized it was longer than I expected. The intrusion detection system that had blocked an attack linked to a state-sponsored group. The network segmentation project that stopped ransomware from spreading. The encryption upgrades that helped the company meet new federal standards. Each line I wrote felt like reclaiming a piece of value I had never fully acknowledged before. I sent that resume to 3 recruiters who had reached out to me over the years. Less than 2 days later, my phone started ringing. Not vague promises like at Summit, but concrete offers, clear, and most importantly, respectful. Within a few weeks, I had more options than Summit had ever offered me in years. I chose Iron Gate Security. Position, Principal Security Architect. Salary, $148,000. Bonus, 18%. Equity, real, meaningful equity. I didn't need more time to think. I just needed one clear moment to walk away without looking back. 36 minutes after I placed my resignation letter on the table, someone knocked on my apartment door. When I opened it, I almost didn't recognize him at first. Stephen Blake, the CEO of Summit, was standing there, his tie loosened, his suit wrinkled, his hair no longer perfectly in place. He didn't waste time. "We need you back, right now." I didn't invite him in. I just stood in the doorway and listened. The primary defense system was failing. Data wasn't being processed. Defense contractors were already demanding explanations. No one understood what was happening. I listened, but I didn't feel what most people might expect. No sense of satisfaction, just a very cold clarity. Because 36 minutes earlier, that same company had made it very clear what I was worth. And now, as everything started to fall apart, they were finally realizing the true value of what I had done for 21 years. Stephen said I could name any price for a single day of work. I looked at him, then shook my head. "I don't work there anymore." I closed the door. The knocking continued a few more times, each one more urgent than the last. Then it stopped. And for the first time, I let a system collapse without going back to save it. The incident lasted 16 hours. I didn't follow it in real time, but later I learned the company lost tens of millions of dollars. 2 major contracts were canceled. A series of security evaluations were suspended, and the people who once believed the system was stable finally understood who it had been depending on. A few months later, I received an email from Summit. An offer to come back, higher salary, higher position, more authority. I read it carefully, then I declined. Not because I was angry, but because I had learned something. Some places only recognize your value after they lose you. And if you go back, they'll forget again. At Iron Gate, I don't have to prove myself every day. When I say a system has a problem, they listen. When I propose a solution, they act. Not because I speak better, but because they understand the value of someone who has real, lived experience. Looking back, I don't see what I did as revenge. I simply walked away. And sometimes, that's the most powerful way to protect your own value. If you've made it this far, thank you, truly. With so much content out there, the fact that you chose to spend your time on this story means more than you know. And if you want to hear more stories like this, about value, choices, and life-changing moments, consider subscribing. Because you never know. The next story might be yours.